Hello, this is Erin. Welcome to Seek the Magic, where we find the enchanting and the beautiful things in every day. Today I want to talk about my daughter, the comedian, which my daughter has just turned a year old in June, and she's been laughing, smiling since, 4 or 5 months. But as of late, my observations have been that her favorite joke is almost putting something she knows she can't have in her mouth and then looking at me, pausing and smiling and laughing. And it's so funny because, of course, one of her favorite things to do is grab my phone when I'm not looking. And she knows that will get a reaction. But then sometimes I let her scroll through it for a second, especially if it will mean a moment of silence for me to do something else. But then she will bring it up to her mouth. And I'm like, absolutely not. That can go close to your mouth. Gross. And she will do it for the joke of it, even though that means that I will then immediately take the phone away because she can't have it near her mouth. But she will bring it close to her mouth or something else like a toy or something she finds. And she is becoming aware enough, and she learns very quickly that, when I say no, then she knows she's not supposed to. But instead of completely defying me, she seems to understand, I know I'm not supposed to do this. I'm going to try to get your attention by tempting this and then look at you and we'll share a moment. And it's an amazing and beautiful form of communication first, because obviously she doesn't have the language development yet, but, she's obviously having this complex, sort of thought process of, okay, we're sharing a moment. I know I'm not supposed to do something. I know I'm not supposed to do something. You don't want me to do something. And I'm going to almost go there and we're going to share a moment. And then I'm going to laugh and say, oh, just kidding, Mom. And I think, humor is something that's obviously complex and different for every individual. And there's a myriad of ways to convey humor and think about it and use it as a device. But I think it's just beautiful that my little daughter, who's 1 year old, is expressing humor and doing it on a regular basis. And, obviously very much getting my attention, which I'm sure is one of her primary motivations, but also the fact that is something she wants to share, and that humor is something that we seek from a very young age. And I think that that's a beautiful thing and something to remember, and a way to continuously inject levity into our lives. I consider humor a form of magic because it lifts your spirits. It brings perspective. It can change the mood of a situation. And, it's an amazing device. I think about it and want to include it in my life as much as I can. If there's a serious situation or a situation at work where there's like tense moment, it's a way to artfully bring in another point of view or create space between maybe something that will be a consequential decision or a tense situation that helps create connection. And I think that is a really key thing. So I use it quite often, not necessarily intentionally always thinking about it in my brain, but it's more of an intuitive sort of thing. Like this situation, it feels like it calls for something that will change the mood, make it a little lighter. So that's how I use it. And I think it's absolutely magical. I would say that it's one of the things that certainly attracted me to my husband, that his sense of humor. And he has a very dry sense of humor and sort of like it can sneak into conversations, very subtle. And I appreciate that. And, I think a lot of my friends are quite humorous too in their own way. So it's certainly something that I completely value and I think can be a magical part of life. And as I've, evolved as a mother, I'm recognizing how fundamental it is in our lives because, young child will seek to be funny and see, find the laughter, and that's a very fundamental part of how we evolve and grow up from a young age, but not only laugh at things that are funny, but also, try to create humor. I mean, I think that that's amazing. So wanted to speak about that and just reflect on it a little bit. And, really what makes something a joke is the unexpected nature, the timing, and the shared understanding of it. So obviously in this situation with my daughter, she's like, I know I'm not supposed to do this. I'm going to, create a situation in which I'm about to do something I'm not supposed to do. And I'm going to wait for you to realize it. And then we'll have a connection about it. And so, she's doing that so much, and she will do so at the sacrifice of, she obviously enjoys the entertainment of, looking at a cell phone, mainly, for the video functionality. She, can look at herself and see herself moving in the camera, but she won't sacrifice that because she will have the moment of shared connection by saying, I'm about to put this in my mouth. And then she knows she's going to get the phone taken away. And maybe she's not thinking about the consequences quite at that level, but her preference is go for the shared connection and let's make the joke of that. And that's a great, reflection point. And I think that obviously part of this is her recognizing the social rules that I'm establishing or that we're establishing as a family and testing boundaries and seeking reactions. But there's certainly the element of the shared moment of connections, which I absolutely love. So, and I think about this, what can we learn from this? And I think, and I'm sorry if you hear my daughter in the background, maybe right now she thinks not everything is quite so funny. But this is a way that we can bring a moment of joy, levity into situations that we're in on a daily basis. And it's a way to create connection. Obviously, there's an art to this. People can try to be humorous and can do so in ways that can be annoying. It's not at the right moment. So, certainly a skill to develop and test, much like kids test their boundaries and humor and things like that. So it's certainly something to do artfully and understand. But I would say using your intuition is a good way to start and a guiding point to listen to maybe not what your mind is concentrating on a goal or something like that, but, just what does this moment call for, and what emotions or point of connection would be helpful in this moment, and that can be a beautiful thing. I would say just in breaking down the elements of a joke, thinking about or moments, what could support these moments, just the element of surprise. What can you bring into a situation that is maybe a contrast or slightly different than what the topic is called for at the moment? It might, provide a different perspective. Also contrast the juxtaposition of one thing with something else, creating or releasing a moment of tension. And then, obviously the levity and or connection that can help with that. So I think the things we can learn, obviously this is another way to find joy in everyday moments. This is a way to provide connection and or widen the aperture about different ways to think about situations. And it's also a reminder not to take ourselves too seriously. So thank you for listening to the moment of magic and the toddler humor that I've discovered. And I hope that you can find the magic in your day to day. Thank you. Bye.